global stability are impacted by global climate change, brought to you by Climate Fact Checks. I'm Nuandara Mudalige, your moderator for this session. Before we dive into the insightful discussions lined up for today, let me provide an overview of Climate Fact Checks. Climate Fact Checks is a part of Fact Crescendo, and we are dedicated to delivering accurate and credible information on climate-related issues. Our latest venture is into climate fact-checking, where we strive in bringing attention to facts rather than fiction in climate change-related media narrative. Stay connected with us and explore more on our website, climatefactchecks.org, for in-depth analysis articles. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel and join us on Instagram and Facebook for the latest updates. And also, don't forget to ask for exclusive content. Our webinar aims to create a platform for informed discussions on topics critical to global community. Well, today we have a guest speaker who will shed light on complex relationship between national security and the impacts of global climate change. Our speaker is no stranger to these matters, holding the position on Director of Media at the Ministry of Defense and serving as the Overlooking Director General at the Institute of National Security Studies. Please join me in welcome Colonel Nalin Herath, and I cordially invite you, sir, to continue the session.
Okay, thank you, Nuandara, for the introduction. And let me share the presentation. All right, shall I start then?
Yeah, sure.
Right, okay. Good evening, everyone. So, first of all, I extend my sincere gratitude to Kalana and Nuandara for inviting me to connect with you all. And I will briefly elaborate you in a simple manner about the national security and global stability, and how its impact, what are the impacts of global climate change. National security and global stability are dependent on global climate change. For national security and global stability to prosper, it's like we need to react proactively when it comes to the global stability and the climate change. And first of all, let me explain you very simple manner what is national security. Right. When you consider about national security, you have a narrow meaning and the broad meaning. First of all, let me give you the narrow meaning. So it's basically national security is the security of the state. State means if you take a country, that country can be known as a state, right? Then if you take the Sri Lankan context for your better understanding, I'll take the Sri Lankan context. If you take the Sri Lankan state, it includes the executive, legislature, and the judiciary, right? So the government versus state. Normally, the government is the particular political organization which runs the matters of the state. Sometimes people talk about government and state as one entity, but it's not one entity. Both those are two entities, right? And the military if you take the military, is an arm of the executive branch when it comes to the Sri Lanka and most of the countries. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces is the president or maybe prime minister. So public servants normally act according to the government directives and the law. Normally, when it comes to the national security, basically the relevant, most responsible segment in a country is the military. So what is the importance of protecting the state? So we know that when you take the state, that state has the particular sovereignty, the authority, right? So sovereignty lies in the people. So state exercises people's powers. So you have different political systems, like democratic system and communist system, right? And so attacks on the state affect people's sovereignty and the governance, right? So people's sovereignty and the government. So protection of the state. Now let us discuss broad and inclusive sense. Okay. National security includes the security of the entire nation, as I explained you earlier. So to secure the nation, you need to protect people. It means citizens of the particular state, the individual and collective physical security, and public health and state and governance structures. When it comes to the Sri Lankan context, we have provincial council, local governments, etc. Then physical components. What are the physical components? Land, rivers, buildings, or whatever the infrastructure of the state. Then environment, natural resources, those are also coming under the national security. Then infrastructure, all the roads, water system, digital networks. And I would like to include cyberspace also, because in the world, if you take the world or any country, most of the systems are actually connected to the cyber. Okay, now as a definition, let's see what is national security. So national security is not restricted to territorial integrity and the sovereignty. Therefore, national security encompasses wide range of soft threats, including water security, energy security, food security, environmental security, economic security, and the political security. So this is how national security defined. That's the simple definition which I can give you. Then, what is climate change? Now let me explain what is climate change. So climate refers to the long-term patterns of weather in a specific location. So climate change signifies a modification in these typical conditions. However, scientists assert without uncertainty that the notably swift climate change just witnessed in the last century are a result of human activities. Now the entire world is discussing, there's a dialogue is going on about the climate change. Okay, now let's see what are the consequences of the climate changes. So here, most of the experts, they visualize, they defines the climate change as a threat multiplier. Why it is called a threat multiplier? Climate change is existing security challenges by amplifying risks to infrastructure, resources, population through extreme weather events, sea level rise, and resource scarcity. Now, if we evaluated the past experiences, we saw how US experienced a number of natural disasters. Like if you see what happened in 2005, Hurricane Katrina. So it demonstrated how extreme weather events can multiply threats to national security. So this hurricane caused widespread devastation, breaching levees and flooding large parts of New Orleans in USA. So this impact on critical infrastructure, emergency response capabilities, and the displacement of thousands of residents highlighted the vulnerability of the region to extreme weather events worsened by climate change. And it destabilizes impacts like food and water shortages, mass migrations, and regional conflicts can destabilize nations and regions, leading to heightened security risk. So now, even if you take about this ongoing conflict in Syria, we know that there are some impacts of the Arab Revolution or the Jasmine Revolution, but some experts analyze that there is a connection for this climate change. So we know that there was a drought in Syria from 2006 to 2011. So this led to widespread crop failures and displacement of rural populations. So this, coupled with poor governance and resource mismanagement, contributed to social unrest, exacerbating tensions and contributing to the Syrian civil war. Another vulnerable factor is the military vulnerabilities. So changing these climate patterns threaten military infrastructure, right? Bases and operations through increased exposure to extreme weather events and rising sea level. Now, we know that the largest military is the Chinese military. If you take China military, their numerical superiority is high. So their strength is 2.3 million. But if you take US military has 800 foreign bases, 800 foreign overseas bases. Now you can imagine what kind of what kind of placement they have, what kind of deployment the US military has. It means it's spread all over the world. So these military vulnerabilities arise as changing climate patterns threaten bases, operation, and infrastructure. The impact is not limited to the environmental realm, as seen in the case of Norfolk Naval Station in the United States, that is the world largest naval base in the world, that is Norfolk Naval Station in the US. Okay, facing threats from rising sea levels, thereby jeopardizing military readiness. Now, let me explain what is global stability. And a couple of years ago, we experienced the pandemic, COVID-19. Tell me, and any audience, I'm just asking from you, did we prepare? Had we prepared for the pandemic? Anyone? Just anyone, yes or no? Had the world, global community prepared for the pandemic? Just anyone answer me, yes or no?
In my opinion, no.
Yes. World did not prepare for the pandemic, and world did not anticipate. We never anticipated such kind of threat. We never anticipated such kind of global outbreak. But more than 1 year, the world was standstill. It was not functioning because the world was locked down. You know the repercussions, how people suffer, how the children suffer, right? So this it really affected for the global stability, especially when it comes to the right. Okay, let me explain global stability. Global stability refers to the worldwide state of equilibrium and order across various areas like politics, economics, environment, and society. Okay, it involves the absence of widespread conflict between nations, effective international cooperation, and institutions to prevent larger conflicts like United Nations. Economically, it signifies healthy global economies and financial security. So during the pandemic, all these factors were really affected. Environmentally, it involves sustainable resource management and climate change mitigation. Overall, it's about ensuring peaceful coexistence, prosperity, and sustainability globally. Right. Now you know that the world is experiencing two wars, that is Ukraine and Russian war and the Israel and Hamas war. Now here, according to this analysis, now what happened? So there is a there's a problem with the global stability. That is one side. And now I am going to explain how the climate change can affect or can have some influence for the global stability. Okay. When climate change occurs, it disrupts global stability, including national security. Let's see how. Now, as the Arctic ice melts, we know that there are glaciers in the Arctic Ocean, right? Opening new shipping routes and access to resources. Nations find themselves in heightened competition for control and influence. The depletion of vital resources due to climate change, such as water, arable land, has the potential to spark conflicts and instability, particularly in regions already facing water scarcity. So because of this climate change factor, it means actually climate change means in simple way, increasing the temperature, normal average temperature. So mitigate because of that, what will happen? The glaciers will be melted, and we are going to lose the glaciers, and it will be melted, and there's a problem. So the glacier will be lost from the Arctic Ocean. Now, in the meantime, because of this climate change and as consequences, what will happen? There will be a migration pressures triggered by rising sea level. So, rising sea level means what? You are losing the land, the portion of lands. The island nation like Sri Lanka, Maldives will be heavily affected. And in the meantime, extreme weather events and environmental degradation pose challenges, host countries, and strain geopolitical relations. The economic repercussions of climate-related events, exemplified by disruptions in agricultural production and infrastructure, can reverberate globally, affecting trade, food security, and financial stability. Okay, what is the urgency action the global community has to adopt? Despite the undeniable interconnectedness of climate change, national security, and global stability, there exists a concerning gap between awareness and action. The extraterritorial nature of climate change, impacting nations indiscriminately, demands urgent attention and concerted efforts. So, this climate change, actually, the global community started paying attention, uh, started giving due consideration around 2015-16. Until such time, we know that there was a Kyoto Protocol in 1996, but there was no such a healthy or some kind of constructive dialogue happen in the global. Now, later on, with the invention or with the signing of Paris Accord in 2016, with the leadership of President Barack Obama, so the global community started to come to a common ground or common opinion. Okay, now based on WHO, World Health Organization findings, the effects of climate change on health will encompass various aspects such as illness and fatalities linked to temperature and injuries from extreme weather, the proliferation of disease-carrying agents, rises in water-related illnesses, and broad repercussions from air pollution. Estimating the precise impact on healthcare expenses nationally present significant challenges, particularly in developing nations and emerging economies, where the establishment of modern healthcare system is still right. There's a problem. So basically, especially because of this climate change action or climate change issue, uh, not only the developing nations will be affected, but also developed nation also will be affected as a global. So if we talk about the strategic responses, okay, strategic responses, the Paris Agreement, which I explained earlier, stand as a significant diplomatic effort to address climate change collectively. So, signed by nearly every country, it aims to limit global temperature rise by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So this agreement represents a strategic response to the security risk posed by climate change by fostering global cooperation and committing nations to take action. And we saw that after President Barack Obama, we saw that President Donald Trump came to power. He came to power in USA, but President Donald Trump did not commit himself for or to carry out or continue with the Paris Accord. So he wanted to withdraw, right? He wanted to withdraw, like even he withdrew from Iranian nuclear deal. In the meantime, he wanted to withdraw from the Paris agreement also. So you see now here, what I want to explain here is how the political will, the political leadership also matters when it comes to like a global, when it comes to a global issue like this, right? Now, global stability and climate change. Okay, now let's see what are the impacts. Geopolitical shift. So, climate change can alter global power dynamics. For instance, as the Arctic ice melts, it opens up new shipping routes and access to previously inaccessible resources. This could lead to increased competition among nations for control and influence in the region. Now we know that countries like US, China, Russia, these countries are actually, they have real interest about Arctic Ocean. So they have a lot of activities, research activities in this region. Now, if there is a ice melt, what will happen? So there will be new avenues of approach, and all these superpowers or like all technological sounds and economical sounds countries, they might go and explore new resources, new energy resources. So then what will happen? It will create some kind of geopolitical tensions among states. Now, even if you consider the present context, you can see how the globe or the world has been divided into different factions. What kind of geopolitical tensions in the world is now. And one way, Russia is fighting with Ukraine, and Ukraine is supported by NATO countries and other countries, right? So now there's a huge tensions between Russia and Europe. And in the meantime, China is acting as a neutral member. North Korea is openly supporting. Iran is openly supporting. So there's a huge geopolitical tension. So what will happen? So with this uh, Arctic ice melts, there will be that geopolitical tension, there will be a geopolitical shift further. Then the next point is resource scarcity. Now, we know that resources are limited. It's not unlimited. So for these limited resources, the nations are vying for this. And we know that if you take crude oil, it's limited. So according to calculation, it will be, so maybe it will enough for another 30 or 40 years, right? That's why countries are trying to deviate from fossil fuel to other renewable energies. We will discuss it. Okay, resource scarcity, depletion of resources due to climate change, such as water and arable land, can lead to conflicts and instability. regions already facing water scarcity like parts of the Middle East and Africa. We know that there's a huge water problem in Middle East and Africa, may experience heightened tensions due to these issues. Another factor is migration pressures. Now we know that because of this sea rising and right sea because of the climate change, the temperature will be increased, and as a result, what will happen? So the rising of the seas going up, sea level will go up. So because of that, what will happen? There will be some of the lands, the island nations like Sri Lanka and Maldives will be badly affected. So this rise in sea levels, right? Extreme weather events and environmental degradation can force populations to migrate. This can strain host countries, right? Trigger social tensions. Now, because we know that the largest migration happened after so some migrations happen in after the Arab Spring, and after that after the Second World War, the largest refugee flow we saw, especially because of the Ukraine-Russia war. So now this can strain host countries, trigger social tensions, and create geopolitical challenges as nations grapple with managing refugee flows and potential conflicts over borders. When there is a heavy refugee flow, what will happen? Though other countries, they have to welcome it as per the international treaties and the conventions. Now we know that if you take Germany and all other European countries, Turkey, so these countries, they have harbored or housed maybe millions of refugees, right? People migrated from other areas, other lands. So then what will happen? So those countries, they need to uh, look after them. They need to commit themselves. They have obligations. They need to look after them. They need to feed them. These are the problems. Other factor is economic impacts. So climate-related events can disrupt economies globally, right? Then affecting trade, agriculture, and infrastructure. For instance, disruptions in agricultural production due to changing weather patterns can lead to food shortages and price hikes, impacting global stability. So continents like Africa, right? So they heavily depend on a lot of trade relations with other maybe neighbors or other states, other nations. So now we know that because of the Ukraine war, now African continent was badly affected because there was a problem with the food supply. The food which was supplied from the Ukraine, it was badly affected. Now there was a problem. Now because of this climate related events also, it can heavily uh, badly affect for the world food supply chain. Then geopolitical shifts, as we discussed, the melting Arctic ice has opened up new opportunities for maritime access and resource extraction. All these developed nations, emerging nations, they need oil, they need fuel, right? They need all these resources, natural resources. As a result, countries like Russia, Canada, United States, and others have increased their interest in the region. The potential for conflicts over territorial claims and resources underscores the changing geopolitical tensions. And the resource scarcity, so we know that resources are limited. The ongoing tensions in the Nile River basin exemplify the potential for conflicts over water resources. We know that there is a problem with Egypt, Egypt and Sudan, right? Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. There's a problem. Ethiopia's construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has sparked disagreements with downstream countries like Egypt and Sudan. So, highlighting the geopolitical eccentricities arising from changes in water availability due to climate-related factors. Right. Okay, nations are increasingly integrating climate consideration into their strategic responses. So in 2015, these agreements ratified, that is Paris Climate Agreement, marking the inaugural universal pact on climate change. Then United Nations Sustainable Development Program aims to achieve 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So now normally initially it was planned the SDG goals going to be achieved in 2030. Now, in my personal opinion, with the present, because of the COVID pandemic and the all other now because of some issues, other global crises, I have my doubt whether the global or United Nations can achieve these sustainable development goals by 2030. However, member states embraced an integrated roadmap for a new global development model for the first time. So in 2030, agenda for sustainable development comprises 17 goals, we know, and 169 targets that amalgamate the various facets of sustainable development like economic, social, and environmental. So that is how the UN is working in one way, and in the meantime, the global community also working on one way. And now let's see mitigating the impact of climate change on military effectiveness. This is very interesting. So now because of this climate change, there are some various factors, especially these factors we have to concern and analyze, especially the military effectiveness. Military operations will be increasingly affected by climate change. How? This is not only because it may make planning and executing operations more complex, but also because armed forces will need to adapt their equipment capabilities for operations in warming and variable climates. Right. So now we have in the one way initially, if you take or if you talk about security, we concern about the traditional threats. Traditional threat means now let's say if you take a state, that state actually concerned about another whether rival state will invade. Right now that that development has been changed. Now we have a lot of other issues. There are like non-traditional threats. What is non-traditional threat? Like if you take like terrorism, drug trafficking, right? Then crimes, organized crimes. Then man-made disasters, like man-made disasters, like if you take Chernobyl, Bhopal incident, Chernobyl incident, and the Fukushima incident, right? And some security hazards. And in the meantime, you have natural disasters. Natural disaster. So whatever the challenge or whatever the situation arises, so the security or military forces normally they are dealing with all these challenges, different challenges. Even if there is a natural disaster, that security forces will be military will be called on, right? They will be called on. Now, if you review last couple of years, you will see there are a lot of flooding, lot of cyclones, and a lot of earthquakes, and there are a number of natural disasters world experienced. We experienced a lot of like the largest uh, earthquakes in Morocco, in Turkey, very recently in Nepal. So likewise, so there you can see that there is a huge increase pattern of these natural disasters also. So in this case, the military readiness is very important to face or to mitigate such kind of development of challenges. Okay, decarbonizing military equipment. Military equipment is currently optimized for military advantage, with little consideration of climate sustainability issues such as emissions reduction. Many planned future equipment acquisitions appear to continue in this mode. For nations that have committed to decarbonization, the most difficult issue will be whether operational capability should be reduced to meet emissions targets, or whether priority should be given instead to protecting capabilities at the expense of emissions reductions. It is unlikely that politicians, citizens, or armed forces will want decarbonization to result in the loss of military capability. So this is another challenge. This is decarbonizing the military equipment. So because reason is the armed forces and decarbonization, we have the answer. The trends raise the question of what action armed forces and defense establishments, right? Defense establishments might undertake to reduce their emissions and contribute to national sustainability targets. So in the 2015, as we discussed, Paris Agreement, many nations committed to reducing carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. That's the objective of the United Nations also. While many countries have made policy declarations to this effect, only a few have so far legislated to achieve this goal, including France and the United Kingdom. So this is the problem. So now, we were actually, as we discussed, as I asked from you all, we did not anticipate a challenge or situation like pandemic. Now this climate change also another factor. It cannot be addressed by different nations or different communities. So this has to be considered as a global conflict. Unless the entire global community coming in the same page or coming to a common ground, this problem cannot be addressed. Now, that's why the United Nations and other like countries like especially European Union and even now present President Joe Biden also, they are giving a lot of emphasizing, and they really concerned about the climate change now, because they understood. Now other countries also need to understand. So it is still up to each nation whether they include their military emissions in net zero targets. So now, when you talk about military emissions, so military equipment, so their emissions are a bit high comparatively other equipment. Now, if you take armor tank, it consumes a lot of fuel comparatively a car, right? So military emissions were exempt under the Kyoto Protocol, right? Now, while Paris eliminated that loophole, reporting on them remains voluntary. For states that include military emissions in their legal net zero requirement, the question of reducing military emissions may be one of not when or if, but how, although this is not the same for all. So that's why I said that entire world has to come to a common agenda. Okay, now let me conclude the session with this. Okay, the nexus between global climate change, national security, and global stability is indisputable. There is no doubt. Addressing climate change isn't solely an environmental concern. It's a strategic necessity for a secure and stable future. Collaborative efforts and proactive strategies are imperative to navigate this evolving terrain. So global climate change is a complex and multifaceted challenge that transcends traditional boundaries and threatens the security and stability of nations worldwide. So the environmental, economic, and geopolitical consequences are interconnected, creating a web of challenges that demand a comprehensive and collaborative response. Addressing the impact of climate change requires mitigation efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adaptation strategies to cope with the inevitable changes already set in motion. Only through international cooperation, policies and concerted efforts can we hope to mitigate the security risks of such global instabilities, right? So in that case, the entire world has to come to a common agenda. So in the fight against climate change, there is no room for spectators. We are all players on this critical stage, and our collective actions determine the outcome. Right. Let me finish the session with this statement given by UN Secretary General. He went to Arctic Ocean on 25th of November this month, and there he gave a videos call via on the through video he gave a statement. I quote: "Ice here is melting into the ocean at record rates, raising sea levels and directly endangering the lives and livelihoods of people in coastal areas across the globe. We must act now to get the climate crisis under control. We must protect Antarctica to protect ourselves." Unquote. And thank you very much for your patience hearing. And if you have any questions, so I am ready to answer with my capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your explanation outlines the critical requirement of understanding these trends in this era. Now it's time for your questions. If you have any queries for Colin, Nalin, Herath, please type them in the chat box. And of course, you can ask directly by unmuting your microphone. For that, please use the raise hand option, then we'll unmute you. I will do our best to address as many as we can. Also, your feedback is invaluable to us. I'll share the feedback form in the chat box. And please take a moment to share your thoughts by filling out the feedback form.
I think Commander Amila Prasanga is raising the question.
Hello, sir. Good evening. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, Amila, please go ahead.
Sir, thank you very much for insightful discussion and the presentation. So I am also very curious about this area of research, and I wanted to ask, in global context, even the small island state in the Pacific and the other areas, particularly Pacific and the Indian Ocean region, having a huge vulnerability in both sides. One is geographically, they are vulnerable because of they are having geostrategic interest in the regional arena is concerned. In other part, that they are more vulnerable for that increasing level of sea level and the other climate change impact. So these protocol and the upgoing conversations are not much into consideration into the small island developing state impact, and that also, sir, that their emission level is very minimal. So what is your idea, what is your suggestions to mitigate this small island state impact, and they are not much rich to overcome their challenges? So how can globally support for this small island state in the climate change impact overcome is concerned?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question. First of all, I would like to say now here that some countries they come up with the argument that okay, developed states like countries like if you take US, then the European Union, right? China is a developing nation, right? So and most let's say don't misunderstand the word I am using. The two largest polluters are US and China, right? So now countries like small nations, right, developing nations like Sri Lanka, Maldives, right, all other countries, we are not active members of the greenhouse emission, right? We don't omit that kind of considerable amount of gases. Now, some may argue, okay, all these developed nations, they are the people, they are the countries, they are the nations who have heavily contributed for the climate change because of the because of the fossil fuels. They use a lot of fossil fuels, and because of that, they release a lot of carbon gases. And countries, small states, developing countries like Sri Lanka, so we don't contribute that much. And somebody might argue, okay, it is not fair, it's very unfair. But one thing we need to understand here, so this climate change issue is, when it comes to climate change issue, it's not going to apply for developed countries in a different way, developing states in a different way. The we need to understand here is it's going to apply or affect entire world to the entire world in the same way. It doesn't care about whether you are a developed country, whether you are a developing country, whether you are a small state. This is the first thing we need to understand here. So therefore, now all other like developed countries also need to come. They need to understand this fact and the factor, and they need to come to a common understanding. Okay, they also have some certain obligations because they heavily contributed for the releasing of pollution, world global pollution. So they need to, one way, as a global mechanism. So UN here, UN can take some kind of initiative, the leadership, and ultimately now we are going to, now very soon we will see that COP28 meeting is going to be held. So there, they all together, they need to sit and together they need to come to a common ground, discuss and sort it out. Because time is limited. Time is limited. We need to understand this. So here, we need to face this challenge to mitigate this kind of challenge, climate change challenge, as together, as a team, as entire international community. So here, then we can't argue, okay, you contributed heavily and you are the country most heavily contributed for the greenhouse gases. So now here we can't do that. So here we need, what we need to understand, okay, from whatever the possible steps we can take, positive steps we can take, we have to take it. So reducing the fossil fuels and converting our vehicle fleet into electric vehicles. So and likewise, so we need to have certain roadmap agenda, okay, like 2020 to 35. So now Europe, they have a certain roadmap, okay, by most of the countries by 2035 they are going to convert all their vehicle fleet into the electric vehicle. So likewise, there should be some kind of strategy to face or mitigate this challenge. Otherwise, we can't fight isolate. I hope I answered your question, Prasanga.
Yes, I also have a small question. Uh, while Sri Lanka is not, as you mentioned, while Sri Lanka is not in the Arctic region, the warming of the Arctic has global implication. You mentioned it in your explanation. How might changes in trade routes and resource availability due to Arctic warming impact Sri Lanka's geopolitical and economic landscape?
Actually, Sri Lanka is located in a very strategic location, strategic position. So that's why Sri Lanka is attracted by different powerful states like from the history, from long time era, Sri Lanka was attracted by different states. Now, we know that there is a kind of geopolitical competition is going on because countries like US, India, China, even like countries like Japan, they are really concerned or interested about Sri Lankan geostrategic location. So here, what I can see that now, as per our president, so he very clearly explained that Sri Lanka is not going to take any sides. And President very clearly mentioned that Indian Ocean region. So now Sri Lanka has taken over the IORA chairmanship, presidentship. So he very clearly mentioned that. So Indian Ocean, that there should be free of navigation for all countries. So Indian Ocean cannot be another geopolitical battleground for all these countries, because he very clearly claimed that okay, there should be free of navigation for all members. So here again Sri Lanka is formulating a foreign policy now. Still for all, Sri Lanka has been adopting a non-aligned foreign policy. It's been a friend of all, enmity to none. So we have all the diplomatic relations or whatever the understanding with all nations, and we don't take sides with states. So here we need to collaborate, or we need to deal with all these states. And we can't deviate from, okay, we can't take sides. So we need to deal with US, China, India, or European Union, and even sometimes in case Russia, right? We have some trade relations. We don't have much trade relations with Ukraine, but when it comes to tea, we have a lot of trade relations with Russia. So likewise, I think we need to adapt in the same path, and without taking sides. We need to be as Sri Lanka, and we are a sovereign state. We are a sovereign state, and we know that Sri Lanka is undergoing a kind of economical turmoil, but so trying to recover. And but one thing we cannot remember, we can't forget that we need the international community support and the assistance. So with the international community assistance, we have to recover, right? So likewise, definitely, when it comes to issues like climate change, Sri Lanka also can take some kind of positive role. Now, Sri Lanka is going to establish like a climate change university in Sri Lanka, right? Now, Sri Lanka taking now France government has agreed to support us in that case. So likewise, Sri Lanka also as a small state, as an island nation, so Sri Lanka also can formulate or take positive steps to mitigate with the other global, international community, with other states. We can also work together hand in hand to mitigate this kind of issues, because this is a global issue, global challenge, not a challenge to Africa, Asia, or Europe. No, this is going to be a global challenge. So as a global community, we have to face together.
Yes, it's clear. And we got another question. I'll read it. So engaging local communities is crucial for building climate resilience. Can you share some examples of community-based initiatives in Sri Lanka that focus on adapting to climate change and enriching local resilience?
Yeah, here that important thing is you need to increase the resilience and on this situation. That only thing is important thing is the dissemination of information and the awareness, because the community has to be educated in this, because I know that in the ground level, most of the community citizens, they don't have a clear understanding about this climate change, right? So initially, can you remember when we initially, at the initial stage, when we faced this COVID-19, you see how we faced as a country, right? How difficulties we faced to educate the people, right? It took lot of days, lot of weeks, lot of months to educate the people, right? Because of the because of the unawareness of the issue, people exposed for the virus. Now here, only thing is here we need to do a proper education. The awareness is very important. Through the awareness and the capacity building, we can we can develop the resilience of the community. So as a whole country can face together. Otherwise, it's very difficult to face such kind of issues, because you are dealing with the nature, no? You are dealing with the nature. In that case, again, I would like to add now. So here you need to engage with different communities, right? As a country, Sri Lanka, we have Sinhala community, we have Islam community, we have Tamil community, so we have the English speaking community. So here we need to disseminate this information, and the readiness and the education has to be done in different language. So whatever we need to get involved all these stakeholders, right, from government as well as non-government organizations, and with the assistance of the international community. So with that, we can do the we can do the capacity building. So likewise, so we can disseminate the information, and education is the must. That is number one priority, the awareness. Otherwise, until people is aware about the real threat, what is the real threat, so then it's very difficult to cope up with the situation.
Well, hope you got informative answers for your questions. As we are running out of time, let's conclude the session. Before we conclude, a couple of important reminders. If you're having further questions, you can reach us via our social media accounts. And also, this session is being recorded and will be made available afterward on our YouTube channel. Also, my biggest thank to you, Colonel Nalin Herath, for sharing your expertise with us today. For your insights have been invaluable. And of course, thank you to our participants for being a part of this important conversation. And thanks you to all, and have a good evening.
And thank you very much, and have a good evening.